The trail had seemed harmless at first. Just a weekend getaway. Lena, Jay, and Mark had planned it for weeks. No phones, no schedules, just them, nature, and a scenic loop through a remote section of the Kahurangi National Park. Lena, always the cautious one, had highlighted every twist on the map, packed extra protein bars, and brought a satellite compass. Mark, a thrill-seeker with just enough backcountry experience to be dangerous, convinced them to take an unmarked path he read about on a forum. It was supposed to be shorter. More scenic. More fun. It was a mistake. 2 hours in, the canopy thickened. The sky disappeared behind a web of branches and the sun's angle shifted fast. When Lena checked the compass, the readings jumped. Her GPS pinged once, then died. Jay joked that they'd entered the twilight zone. No one laughed. They should have turned back. But Mark pressed on, sure the trail curved back. Then the storm rolled in. Quick and cold, like the bush had been holding its breath. Within minutes, the dirt became sludge. Their jackets soaked through. Jay slipped, twisting his ankle. They had no signal, no shelter, no trail markers. By the time they stopped, the light was gone. They set up an emergency tarp between trees, huddled beneath it in silence, shivering. Lena's fingers trembled as she lit a damp match to start a fire. It fizzled. Jay groaned in pain. Mark paced, mumbling about elevation, water sources, rescue response times. The forest at night was a different animal. Every rustle became a threat. Rain tapped like whispers on leaves. In the distance, something howled, long, low, and not at all like a dog. Lena told herself it was wind. Her heart didn't believe her. Sleep didn't come. Jay's breathing grew labored. Lena tightened the wrap around his ankle, whispering that they'd be okay. That someone would find them. That the trailhead wasn't that far. Mark said little. His confidence was gone, replaced by something brittle. At dawn, the storm left as fast as it came. But everything had changed. Their packs were damp. Their food was halved. Their map unreadable. The path was gone. Lena stood in the grey light and looked at the forest around her. No signs. No sounds of people. Just green. Endless green. She swallowed hard. They were lost. And now, the real story would begin. The morning after the storm brought more than damp clothes and aching limbs, it brought panic. The forest, washed clean by the rain, had lost all familiar markers. The path they came in on was now just underbrush and shadows. The sky was overcast, blocking the sun. Lena's compass spun uselessly, and the GPS refused to connect. Their food supply was halved, and Jay could barely stand. His ankle had swelled, turning purple beneath the wrap. Mark wanted to move. If we keep going east, we'll hit the river, he insisted. Lena wasn't so sure. Her gut told her to stay and wait. But Jay, pale and sweating, couldn't travel far. They needed water. They needed shelter. They needed hope. Lena took lead, packing the essentials and fashioning a makeshift crutch from a fallen branch for Jay. Mark climbed a nearby slope, trying to get a better view, but all he saw was trees. Endless, unbroken green. As they moved through the dense bush, the group began to change. Jay was quiet, limping with every step. Mark grew agitated, snapping at twigs, snapping at Lena. She stayed calm, remembering what her father had told her: calm is a blade, sharp, precise, and the only thing that'll cut through fear. By midday, their stomachs growled. Lena boiled stream water in a pot she brought for emergencies. Mark caught insects. Jay could barely keep down sips of water. Lena watched him closely. His skin was cold, his lips dry. He was dehydrated, possibly slipping into shock. That night, huddled in a new camp under a fallen pine, Jay finally broke down. "What if we don't make it?" he whispered. "What if this is where we die?" Lena didn't answer. Not right away. Instead, she reached into her pack and pulled out an old, battered notebook, her survival notes. Inside were diagrams, tips, lists. She handed it to Jay. "Read this. Remind yourself we know things. We've trained for this. We are not victims. Mark scoffed, but softened when Jay began reading aloud. To purify water, boil for 10 minutes. To avoid hypothermia, insulate with dry foliage. To attract rescue, build signal fires in threes. The fire they built that night caught flame. The warmth was everything. The three of them sat close, watching embers float into the canopy like fireflies. They were still lost. Still scared. Still bruised. But that night, for the first time, they weren't just surviving. They were learning how to fight back. Into the Green Part 3, Hollow Hills expanded. By day 4, hunger blurred the edges of reality. The forest no longer looked like a place. They had entered something primal, where time and direction held no meaning. Jay mumbled in his sleep. Lena hadn't changed her socks in 3 days. Mark's eyes had taken on a twitchy edge, flicking at shadows. They tried snaring rabbits but failed. Their only protein was the grubs Mark dug from a rotting log, eaten raw with grimaces and a resolve born from desperation. Jay was barely walking. Lena had taken to half-carrying him using a rope looped over her shoulder. Midday brought the worst. Mark vanished. 1 minute he was scouting, the next, he was gone. Panic surged through Lena. She left Jay propped against a tree and followed broken branches up a ridge. At the top, she found Mark standing motionless before a strange structure, an old shack, buried in moss and silence. Inside, the air was stale. The floor creaked. They found rusted gear, shattered bottles, and a notebook. Water-warped pages revealed scrawled messages from a hiker who'd also gotten lost, dated almost 20 years prior. One entry read, Day 8 no rescue. Day 9 thinking of walking west. If anyone finds this, you're not alone. Lena flipped to the back. A rough map was sketched over a faded napkin, markings of rivers, an X near what might have been a ranger's cabin. She copied it into her notebook. They returned to Jay with a tin of old sardines, expired, but edible. Jay cried as he ate. Later, under the flickering campfire, Lena heard sobbing. Not Jay. Not Mark. Jasmine. She was gone. They shouted into the darkness. No answer. They split up, Lena alone with the wind and trees. An hour passed. Then 2. Finally, she heard murmuring near a dry creek bed. Jasmine stood barefoot in a shallow depression, her arms limp, whispering, It wants us here. It's watching. The forest doesn't let go. Lena took her hand. Jasmine didn't resist. Just cried. Back at camp, they wrapped her in spare clothing. Mark sat awake, sharpening a stick into a spear. Not for hunting. For defense. That night, no one slept. They had shelter. They had food. They had a map. But their minds were beginning to crack, and Lena knew the wilderness wasn't just testing their bodies. It was testing their souls. The forest felt heavier now, quieter, as if even the birds were watching. On the morning of day 6, Mark stepped into a snare trap hidden in the underbrush. The branch snapped up violently, jerking his leg into the air with a bone-deep crack. His scream echoed through the trees like a flare. Lena rushed to him, heart pounding. Blood soaked through his pants. It wasn't just a sprain, it was a break. They couldn't leave him behind. They wouldn't. Lena tore her shirt into strips, creating a makeshift splint using sticks and tape from her medkit. They crafted a travois, a primitive stretcher, out of branches and vines to drag him. Jay, though pale and still limping, volunteered first. Jasmine helped without speaking. It took them all day to move a kilometer. That night, the fire was harder to build. Their last cotton ball soaked in Vaseline was used as tinder. Lena rubbed sticks until her palms bled. Eventually, a spark caught. The warmth it gave felt like something sacred. Mark barely spoke, fading in and out of consciousness. His fever climbed. Lena mixed powdered electrolyte tablets into warm water and forced him to drink. Jasmine began to change. The breakdown she suffered seemed to flip a switch. She started drawing symbols in the dirt, replicas of the map from the old journal. She pointed toward a rise in the west. It's there, she said. The cabin. That's what the X meant. They voted. With food gone and the team failing physically, the only choice was to follow Jasmine's direction. The next 2 days were survival in its rawest form. Jay collapsed twice. Lena carried more weight than her frame should allow. They moved at a crawl. They heard a helicopter once, distant and fast. They built a signal fire with fern leaves. Nothing came. Lena started recording notes on tree bark. Instructions. Apologies. Just in case. Then, late afternoon, as the light turned amber, they saw it, an old ranger outpost, half buried in vines, a faded red cross on the door. Inside, stale blankets, rusted supplies, and a radio. Lena hit the power. Static. Then a voice. Please repeat, identify your coordinates. She wept into the speaker. They were found. And though the nightmare wasn't over, the mental scars, the physical ones, it was the first time in days they saw something real. Hope. The rescue came at dawn. The sound of the rotor blades sliced through the canopy like a knife through fog. A paramedic in bright orange dropped into the clearing behind the ranger outpost, followed by 3 more with stretchers, blankets, and questions. Lena barely heard any of it. She sat against the outpost wall, eyes hollow, arms wrapped around Jasmine, who hadn't spoken since the night before. Jay was carried out first, light, frail, but conscious. He gripped Lena's hand weakly as they lifted him into the air. You kept me alive, he whispered. Mark, fevered and shivering, groaned as they moved him. Lena helped the crew splint his leg better and whispered the medications he'd taken, her voice mechanical. She was a med student again. But she didn't feel like one. As the helicopter lifted off with the last of them, Lena stared at the tree line. It looked almost peaceful in the morning light. Deceptive, like a painting that didn't show the screaming underneath. Back in town, media swarmed. Photos. Headlines. Lost 5 found alive. Lena answered what she could, but only once. She gave the reporters a single statement: survival isn't strength. It's choosing to keep going. Even when every part of you says stop. Jay spent a month in hospital. Mark had surgery and would limp for life. Jasmine entered a trauma recovery program. She began painting images of trees, of walls made from fog, of girls made of firelight and rain. Lena went back to school. But she didn't stay. 6 months later, she published an online survival guide titled Green Lessons, a brutal, honest mix of field tips, emotional trauma awareness, and journal entries from the forest. It went viral. She was asked to speak at schools, hiking expos, wilderness training programs. When asked if she'd go back into the wild, she smiled. I never really left it, she said. But this time, I know which way is out. At the 1-year mark, the group met again at the trailhead. They didn't walk far. Just far enough to leave a plaque. To the forest that tested us. To the selves we left behind. To the pain that became purpose. They didn't say much after that. Just stood a while, together. Then turned. And walked back. Into the light.